again, friends. It's me, Miss Christina. I'm back with another video of the first case with Detective Gordon. This is a mystery story, and we've read chapters 1 and 2 already. So we're back to read 3 and 4. And I want to remind you, let's think about what we've read so far. We met Detective Gordon, and do we know this person? Do we know this character yet? I don't know. Let's see. We have met these two characters. And there is a problem that Detective Gordon is trying to help with and solve. And this is the last picture that we saw. This is the last illustration. And the new problem is that Detective Gordon is frozen solid. He was watching the place where the nuts were stolen, and he finally saw something, but he cannot move. So let's continue with chapter 3, Interrogation of the Subject. There's my little sticky bookmark. All right. The mouse disappeared. Detective Gordon could just make out the top of the brown nut bouncing away in the snow. But the detective was stuck with frozen fingers and toes. "Help in the name of the law!" cried the detective. Then he added a little more gently, "Please." The nut stopped bouncing. It was motionless. Then it came back, hesitantly. The nut drew closer. Beneath it was a small and very young mouse. "Good evening," said the detective. "Good evening," said the mouse. The detective cleared his throat. "Could you help me, please?" The mouse put down the nut and began to brush snow from the detective. It tried to free one of his legs. "Ouch," said Detective Gordon. The mouse began to dig with its tiny hands. Now and then it blew on its palms to warm them. The mouse managed to free one of the detective's legs. The leg was strong and covered in warts. The foot had webbing between the long toes, which were blue and cold. The mouse shuddered a little and dug out an arm. Then Detective Gordon was able to free the rest of himself. "I won't write it in my report," he said, clearing his throat, "that I was frozen solid like that." "I'm terribly hungry," said the mouse. "Am I allowed to eat this nut?" You might as well," said the detective. Terribly hungry, he thought. That would mean the mouse wasn't a significant thief. A significant thief who had stolen hundreds of nuts would not be walking around hungry. Besides, a little mouse was rarely a significant thief. The mouse quickly gnawed a nice little hole in the top of the nutshell. It poked its tiny arm and pulled out small, quick bites. Its eyes closed in pleasure. "I must ask you to come with me to the police station," said the detective firmly. The mouse said nothing. The detective stood with difficulty. He was mighty cold and stiff in his legs, seemed to creak and feel and tremble when he straightened them. "I must also ask you to help me get to the police station," said the detective. The mouse supported him, and they limped slowly onto the path and down to the police station, where a light still shone in the window. The detective opened the door. The mouse hesitated on the threshold. There we go. There's inside. The little creature looked around anxiously. "No one's here," said the detective. "I'm the only policeman in the forest. It's just me, sadly." The detective set to work, lighting the fire in the wood stove and putting on the kettle. Meanwhile, the mouse sat on the visitor's stool, dangling its legs. When the detective had made the tea, he took 4 cakes from one of the big tins. "These are the evening and night cakes," he said. They were chocolate cakes with blackcurrant jam. He served up 2 each. Then he sat in his swivel chair opposite the mouse. "I don't think you're the thief," said the detective. "No, I was just hungry," answered the mouse. "I was so hungry. I was dizzy and faint. My stomach was so empty it hurt. It seemed unfair that I had nothing to eat." The detective blinked his big eyes. He could imagine how awful that would be. "And then I was terrified when you called out in that icy voice," the mouse continued. "Terrible to be hungry," said the detective, shaking his head so that his chins quivered. "Ooh. I shall take notes on our interview. How old are you?" "No years old," said the mouse, and the Detective Gordon wrote down 0. "What is your name?" "I don't have a name," said the mouse. "I'm just a baby mouse." The detective wrote down another 0. "Where do you live?" "Nowhere." Another 0. "And what is your occupation?" The mouse shrugged its shoulders. "I don't have one." The detective wrote down another 0. Then he looked hard at what he had written. 0, 0, 0, 0. The detective sighed. "This is simply awful. 4 zeros. But you must have a name at least. Without a name, you're kind of nobody. Without a name, you hardly exist." The mouse looked at his hands and moved them back and forth. "Do I not exist?" it wondered. It looked anxiously at the detective, who had begun to swivel in his stylish chair. The detective had always taken pride in being a toad, and he was very proud of his fine name, Gordon. But there were 2 other names he considered especially beautiful, Buffy and Todd. Now he would choose the perfect one. He thought hard and swung right around in his chair. It squeaked. "I'm a girl, by the way," said the mouse. "Aha, that made it easier." "Your name will be Buffy," said the detective. "It's a beautiful name." The mouse looked very happy with her new name. Or was she simply glad that she existed? "Buffy," said the mouse. "That's me." The detective drank the last of his tea and felt comfortable and warm again. He wrote Buffy on his paper. Then he took out his big stamp. He placed it in the middle of the paper, hesitated, and moved the stamp a little. Then he moved it back again and pressed. Cla-dunk! Buffy laughed happily. That was chapter 3, and now we'll read chapter 4. And we'll continue the book in another video. Chapter 4. Excuse me. Employing a police assistant. Detective Gordon suddenly felt very tired. Buffy yawned too. The night was almost finished. Soon it would be a new day. "You must get some sleep," said the detective. "If you have nowhere to go, there's a bed here." He moved toward the room in the police station with bars on the door and a window. "You can sleep in here," he said. "It's a prison," Buffy said quietly. "It's a nice soft bed and the room is quiet and—" The detective stopped when he noticed that Buffy was crying. "What's the matter?" He put his arm around the mouse. "I don't want to go to prison," said Buffy, sniffling. The detective took the mouse to the other little room in the police station. It was his own bedroom. "You can sleep in my room. I'll sleep in the prison." "Can't we both sleep in the prison?" "Of course," said the detective. So they carried the detective's bed into the prison. And then they lay down side by side, each in their own bed. The detective turned out the light. "Good night," he said. "Good night," said Buffy. Detective Gordon lay thinking over the terrible night. First, he had been forced to go on a mission in the dark forest when everyone else was asleep. Then he had failed to climb the tree to inspect the scene of the crime. dreadful. And then he had frozen solid in the snow. A horrible night. Detective Gordon didn't like horrible things. What he liked most was a warm fire, a cup of tea, and a few cakes, preferably with blackcurrant jam. Ideally, he would like nothing to happen at all. But he was a clever detective, of course. He was good at listening to squirrels and writing reports. He was good at thinking. But perhaps someone could help him with the hard police work, such as climbing and keeping watch, he thought. Perhaps someone younger and slimmer. A little while later, just before he fell asleep, the Detective Gordon suddenly had an idea. Would you like to be a policeman, by the way? Be a what? A policeman. Woman. Yes, said Buffy without a second thought. Then I will employ you as a policewoman. Yes, yes, said Buffy in the dark. But there is one thing, continued the detective, clearing his throat. You mustn't forget that I am the chief of police. That you are my assistant. Yes, chief, answered Buffy. It was quiet for a moment in the dark. The detective heard Buffy giggling with happiness. Tomorrow we have a difficult task, maybe the hardest we've had so far. We must track down the real thief and catch him, or her, or them. We can do it, Chief, said Buffy. Then it was quiet for a long time. Is it really true that I'm a policewoman, Chief? The detective climbed out of bed and disappeared into the dark office. He went to the desk, lit dimly by the moon. Buffy heard the chair squeak, and then she heard a big stamp being placed on a paper, moved a little, then moved back again. Clodunk. Buffy bubbled over and sighed. Good night, Chief. The detective came back and climbed into his bed. Good night. Both of them fell straight asleep. And that's the end of chapter 4. Next time, we'll continue on with chapters 5 and 6. Just to give you a preview, chapter 5 is called Investigating New Tracks. And I see our squirrel friend again. We'll see what happens next. Thanks for joining me again, friends. I'll see you next time. Bye.